What's up, geeks, and welcome back to the Geekcentric podcast. Today, we got our quickfire review for the Netflix animated series Masters of the Universe Revelation Part 1. Welcome to Eternia. My name is Justin, and
by the power of Grayskull, I have the power!
Today I'm joined by my allies and comrades, Nate Shelton, Kevin Hudson. How we doing?
I have the power, okay?
Power!
I'm glad somebody's got the power. I don't have the power. It's one of those Mondays, you know?
Yeah.
Okay, so as I mentioned, we are talking about Netflix's latest animated series, Masters of the Universe Revelation Part 1, a 5-episode series available now on the streaming platform. But before we get into our thoughts, I thought it would be smart to preface to our listeners that we are not diehard fans of the original series, and for all of us, this is our introduction to this property. Our desire to want to review this series, it comes from our appreciation of the property as part of geek culture, and as fans of animated shows in general, and of fans of Kevin Smith. So for us, this is a great mixture of everything. So with that in mind, let us journey from Eternia to Sub-Eternia and get into our thoughts. All right, so now, Nate, being that this was your first exposure to the Masters of the Universe series, what were your thoughts of this show, part 1 of a part 2 story?
I was blown away. I'll be honest with you. It's more than I expected. I didn't have too many expectations going into it, other than I knew that it was going to be 80s and cheesy and fun. And so, you know what, something I actually did, and I might even recommend this to folks who aren't as familiar with He-Man or Masters of the Universe, is I actually watched a couple of documentaries before I jumped into the show. And so I checked out Power of Grayskull, the definitive history of He-Man and the Masters of the Universe, which is on Netflix, as well as The Toys That Made Us, season 1, episode 3. Yeah. And it was just hearing about these guys that made this series, made this original toy collection, and just how they happened to fall into the storyline that encompasses all these crazy named characters, all these really cheesy characters. To me, it really helped to set me up so that when we did get those one-liners throughout the entirety of the series, even in parts where it sort of feels a little inappropriate, it still worked for me. It still really worked for me. And I gotta say, in my mind, this felt very much like The Force Awakens. You know, I could imagine somebody who maybe has never seen a Star Wars movie that watched The Force Awakens. Right. This is the feeling that you're going to get coming into this series if you've not maybe researched or watched some of the original He-Man stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a very good assessment to say that if you haven't seen it, this will get you set up for that, right? So, yeah. Kev, I'm interested to hear your thoughts. I know you and I were both born after the release of this show, and for myself, I was surrounded by the toys from like my cousins and stuff like that. But what was it like jumping into this series, 30 some odd years later?
Yeah, I'm sort of torn with regards to everything. I mean, I don't think I'm nearly as high on my, praise for the show as you guys are. It seems like we're a little bit at odds there. I have an uncle on my dad's side who's not much older than me, and he had every single action figure. And so I looked forward to visits with that part of my family just so I could get in and play with these toys. And again, I never took that and formed a connection with the show or that really terrible Frank Langella movie. It was always just about those toys for me as a kid. I'd love to get my hands on them to this day. I think it's one of the coolest toy lines of all time. They're just some of the coolest action figures. And you were able to sort of make your own stories with them because I didn't have that sort of connection to an actual storyline. But with this show, I don't know, it definitely grew on me over the course of the 5 episodes. And I certainly think the way that the last episode ended had me going, oh, now I'm really interested for part 2.
Yeah,
right.
But it took quite a few episodes for me to actually, sort of get into it. I'm not sure. it almost took itself a bit too seriously at times. Like my favorite part of the show were the quirky bad guys that only had a few lines here and there, like Merman and Triclops. Like those guys were the most fun for me because it was poking fun at them and having some fun at their expense. That said, it's a terrific cast, and they really do, as much as they could with what I think the weakest part of the show was, and that was the actual dialogue and the writing in that regard.
Interesting. Yeah. I think we are obviously at opposite ends. I think this was a blast. I was so excited for this. And again, not because I was a diehard fan. As I said, I was familiar with the toy line. I didn't read the comics or watch the show, but more because of the animation style. I love the animation style, very anime inspired. I love it. And the fact that Kevin Smith was involved, who's like King Geek, and seeing his take on He-Man and Master of the Universe, it was a huge part, right? So, and that being said, Smith is a diehard fan of the original, and from that passion comes like this super well-crafted, mature animated series with a story that has a sense of drama to it. It has stakes. It has some things that make it really, really interesting. And you can see that the story is inspired from the original material, but delivers a very fantastically connected narrative that is meant to expand on the original lore.
And I think it definitely does from what I know of the original lore. But I also think the other thing to consider as well is, when you've got Sarah Michelle Gellar, Lena Headey from Game of Thrones, Liam Cunningham from Game of Thrones, Mark Hamill in this show, delivering these incredible, like these really cheesy dialogue, to your point, Kevin, but with their voices, they elevate it, I find. They elevated all of the dialogue for me, and that's what kept me really intrigued and really into it, and it's also what just made it somewhat more believable. Again, we're talking about characters that are literally, they were made to sell toys, so they're ridiculous, they're insane. But the way that they sort of modernize them for today's audiences, while still keeping this show working for, I think, relatively most ages. I don't know, man. I was so taken aback by all that.
I was thinking too, like the dialogue is a bit cheesy and a bit stale at times, and I feel like that's where that 80s nostalgia comes from. Do you know what I mean? Like it's infused in that, and then the sort of narrative and artistry of it is so today, and like that sort of connective narrative, it feels like today, but the dialogue and the cheesy banter and that stuff, that felt very 80s to me.
I think what I struggled with the most was because it was rated PG, for a show that I think primarily was going to be targeting people in their 30s who would have grown up with the original toy line and that cartoon and maybe even the comics. I think it would have benefited from being a bit more adult in some ways. Even a PG-13 rating might have allowed them to do a bit more with the action and the on-screen fighting that just, it kept it a bit kiddish. And so, it certainly helps that now the people that did grow up with the show are going to be able to introduce it to their kids, and they're going to be able to watch it together. And so if that's the intention here, then I can understand the point, but it felt a bit too much like a kid's show to really be able to invest myself into it.
It's funny that you say that, because that is my biggest gripe with Avatar: The Last Bender, is that it's too kiddish, right? And to me, this is where that sort of fantastical sort of anime fusion style finds itself. I think another fantastic element of the story is how He-Man is relatively secondary in this narrative.
Sure.
And it really does set up these other secondary characters to be primary and kind of finding their own power, right? Like finding their own voice. And I think that's really cool about this show too. It's not just centered on that. It does try to round out this complex character base.
Right. And Kevin, I mean, listen, I do think that I agree with you, because coming from the Castlevania team that did the Castlevania anime on Netflix, you would expect to see a little bit more blood and for it to be maybe a little bit more, a little bit more gruesome. But I do think that in the sense of it growing up, the narrative that you're calling out, Justin, absolutely has helped it to grow up. The voice acting has helped it to grow up. And also the music. I got to shout out the music.
Yeah,
Bear McCreary, who does the score, is just fantastic the way that he takes the original song and weaves it in and out throughout, like, Man of Arms theme and stuff like that. I just fell in love with it. And I do think that those are the ways that this series elevates it. And so for me, that still works. As much as I would love to see the gore in some of the action scenes, I do think that it's making itself grow up with those other factors.
I will say, one thing that did kind of work for me was the narrative direction they took it in that I think if they did focus simply on He-Man, who is, by all intents and purposes, a pretty, it's a pretty lopsided battle anytime he's involved, right? He's
sure, yeah.
He's kicking some serious butt, and that would get pretty old pretty quickly. And so I love that. Yeah, they instead go with a storyline that focuses on a very unlikely alliance. I think that made it very fresh, and that made it, for fans of the original series and for new people, it was something. Yeah, again, where like you said right at the top, there were stakes and you didn't really know what the fate of these characters was going to be. And so kudos in that regard. And I think this was a fairly well-told story that I think we're going to get a very different story, I think, in part 2, obviously with everything that happened there in episode 5. I bet you there are people who've waited 30 years to see what happened there, and so it was cool for us as sort of newcomers, but I'm sure it was even that much cooler for diehard original fans. Really quickly, did you guys get a chance to check out the quick 25-minute documentary on the making of it? Yeah. And so, like, you could just see how much fun Liam Cunningham definitely had playing this character, and he compares it to Davos and saying how, whereas Davos can't fight at all, Man-at-Arms was the sort of badass of this show. Like, anytime he came in for an action scene, it was like, tear it up, man. Yeah.
Well, it looks like we conquered our fears and are ready to venture to pre-Eternia as we wrap this up. But before we get to our final thoughts, question for you guys. Other than He-Man, which of the characters that we've met so far would you want as your guide through Eternia, and why?
Oh, man, that's a good question. You know what? I'm actually going to go with Man-at-Arms for this one. I just think he's just so lovely and
cool.
Cool. Like,
if he has Davros's voice, I'd be totally down.
Davros's voice. And what I would have him do is I would just be like, on those really cold nights after a long battle, I would just hand him a book and just be like, can you read this to me? And he'll turn to me and be like, I can't read, son. Or whatever. I'm like, no, it's Davos. Spoilers for Game of Thrones. But yeah, no, I think Man-at-Arms for me.
I mean, that was going to be my answer, but my close second, Evelyn. Like super hot.
Oh yeah.
And not nearly as evil as maybe you might think. I don't know.
Yeah.
She was I think she was my favorite character just, through this part of the adventure, and she's got a great line right towards the end of the last episode and the end of this part here, where she sort of bids farewell to some people. And I just thought, like, that was a really fun moment for her character. And yeah, so I really enjoyed that.
I went a little obscure. I went with Orko. He's bumbling and quirky, but I feel like he would, keep me safe with spells, not in a fighting way, but like probably like in a cloaking way, like hide us. And also I think a close second, if he was not around, I would probably go to Roboto. Justin Long's voice would be not so bad. So, okay, guys, let's see if we can finish this thing off strong with our final thoughts in a segment we like to call Would Ya?
Would ya recommend this movie? Or something to watch on TV? Would you recommend it to me? Would ya?
All right, now, being that this is our first introduction to this property, would ya recommend this to others who have not seen the series yet, and why?
I would. I think, as I mentioned earlier, it reminds you so much of The Force Awakens. Even some of the things that I had problems with, where they're like, that's a story for another time or whatever, like throughout the series. A couple times they did it. I'm just like, oh yeah, Star Wars The Force Awakens literally did that too. There are so many parallels that I can draw to one of my favorite movies from one of my favorite series. And it's just funny that how the original toy line really came about because of the whole situation with the Star Wars action figures as their main competitor. So it is just funny to kind of see those parallels in this. Yeah, 100% I would. I think the voice acting, I think if you have a problem with a lot of puns and in-jokes, maybe do a little bit of research ahead of time. Maybe, if you can't handle it, go back, watch some of these documentaries, maybe watch a few of the original episodes. And if you fall in love with that cheesiness, awesome. You're going to love it here. If not, it might not be the best thing for you.
Yeah.
But I just have to say, like, the way that they really, we talk about it all the time, confidence. This series has confidence. It knows what it wants to do, and it achieves it.
True.
And it doesn't change the characters dramatically in terms of how they look just because it's cheesy. When we see Man-at-Arms, kicking ass, he's got a massive giant gun on his shoulder that's like a toy. It looks like a toy, and it just really helps to kind of bring back that nostalgia of what it was like to watch a cartoon as a kid while still being elevated as an adult property with everything that I mentioned in terms of the acting and the music.
Kev, would you recommend this to someone who hasn't seen the series?
I'm kind of wondering if I have benefited from seeing some of the shows that Nate mentioned earlier. Primarily for myself, the Toys That Made Us episode really does explain a lot of the backstory. And so you sort of... But that being said, I don't think it's too complex of an idea that if you were just tuning into this for the first time, by the end of episode 1, you've figured out pretty much who these people are and what's going on. Like, it's easy enough to just sort of jump in if this is your first exposure to the characters and the story. And again, I think the smartest thing they did was tell a fresh story. Right. They didn't just tell another story about He-Man against Skeletor. It was a new story. They took it in a new direction. And so, again, I think that works for old fans and for new fans alike.
Yeah, I 100% agree with everything you guys are saying. Probably the only thing I wouldn't agree with is that maybe, like, I feel like the Toys That We Made Us and the other doc that you referred to do give a real nice history background as to how Master of the Universe came to be. It doesn't really outline the history of the show as much as it would outline, let's say, the simplicity of the story, which it does in episode 1. In episode 1, it gives you the simplest way of understanding the story without a headache of having an overloaded, extensive history. It's good versus evil, Eternia, Grayskull, Snake Mountain, boom, it's all there for you. And from that, Kevin Smith and his writing team have infused the nostalgia of what really made the Masters of the Universe special in the series with storytelling that does have strong consequences. And to Nate's point, it's confident and it's intentional. It has intention to what it's doing. Now, as mentioned, this is less about He-Man and it's more of about the secondary characters. And I think that was another really, really great part of this story. It helps really elevate the characters around him, whereas I think in the original cartoons it was just He-Man and Skeletor. However, I think it's safe to say that most of us know who He-Man is as an icon, so it is a refreshing take for them to misdirect. It has a strong visual style, outstanding voice acting, rock-solid score, leading the series that delivers a true revelation for this property, opening the doors for the future of what this could be for more stories in the Master of the Universe saga, if you will. So, yeah, I loved it, and I would totally recommend if you haven't seen it, this is the perfect thing for you to watch. If anything, it might inspire you to go watch the old ones after.
And I will just say really quickly, if you're at all a fan of toys or collectibles or collections, watch the little 25-minute documentary that they sort of do with all the voice actors and Kevin Smith that follows the series, because the background set dressings and the collection they have behind them was like, I was drooling looking at that. Like, I was almost more distracted by that than I was what the actors were saying themselves, because it was dope.
The toys that made us, that episode is really, really great. So I'm going to go back and I'm going to watch that now after watching that documentary, because I loved that episode. It really does, like to your point, Nate, it shows how it was such a backwards approach to how the story came to be. And I think that's what's amazing about the history of Master of the Universe.
And I do think, honestly, hearing those stories of how these characters came together and how sort of haphazardly it happens, it really does set you up to understand that when you have characters like Stinkor and Evil Lyn and Man-at-Arms and Orko and Cringer, these are things where you can start to you can start to forgive the series for having
and
these
understand
sort of silly,
where it comes from.
Exactly. You get that understanding that it's the 80s and they're making money.
Yeah.
And
they're making it up as they go, because kids were just like, they wanted the action figure more than they wanted that. So yes, 100% has our approval. We would recommend it to those who have not seen it. So there you have it, another episode of Quickfire Reviews done. Thank you for tuning in wherever you listen to podcasts. If you haven't already, be sure to subscribe and leave us a glowing review. We always appreciate the love, and we have tons of content for you to enjoy, from reviews to interviews and just plain old chatting. Also, we want to know, have you checked out the series? Are you looking forward to part 2? Or are we totally wrong about this show? Let us know at wearegeekcentric@gmail.com. We'd also love if you check us out on YouTube at youtube.com/geekcentric, and on Twitter at geekcentricyt, and we're always around on Instagram at wearegeekcentric. Kevin, Nate, and everyone listening, you are the true champions, and until next time, peace.